Please welcome Audience Development Manager and Co-Curator at the St. Louis Art Museum, Andrea Purnell, Co-Founder of We Act Radio, Kimone Freeman, Executive Vice President of Campaigns and Advocacy at Hip Hop Caucus, Tanya Clayhouse, and the Mayor of Newark, New Jersey, USA, Ross J. Baraka, with host and hip hop staff writer at NPR Music, Rodney Carmichael.
Well, if you're feeling all right and you think you're on, somebody let me know. Well, everybody in the place put a whistle in your face, scream it out and say, yo, hey! You don't stop, or rock the rhythm that makes your finger pop. I said hip hop, if that's a lot. Come on, everybody, give me what you got. I'm gonna tell you a little story about the Sugar Hill Gang with a pow pow boogie and a big bang bang.
They call themselves writers because that's what they do. They write their names, among other things, everywhere. Names they've been given or have chosen for themselves. Most of all, they write in and on subway trains, which carry their names from one end of the city to the other. It's called bombing. And it has equally assertive counterparts in rap music and breakdancing.
Screaming out and say, I am somebody.
Graffiti writing in New York is a vocation. Its traditions are handed down from one youthful generation to the next. To some, it's art. To most people, however, it is a plague that never ends. A symbol that we've lost control.
I'm Detective Bernie Jacobs. I, in conjunction with my partner, Detective Jim McHugh, are the crime prevention coordinators for the New York City Transit Police Department. Graffiti, as the name itself, is not an art. Graffiti is the application of a medium to a surface. I will show you graffiti, such as the letters on the end of that car directly in back of me. Is that an art form? I don't know. I'm not an art critic. But I can sure as hell tell you that that's a crime.
Not art, it's a crime.
Relationship issues.
That was great.
Yeah. Now, this scene is from the documentary Star Wars, released in 1983, 10 years after the birth of hip-hop, and I think it really offers a snapshot of the complex relationship between hip-hop and the cities that it came from, that it's always come from. Now, contrast that scene with the celebration of hip-hop's 50th anniversary last month at Vice President Kamala Harris's residence right here in D.C., where she called hip-hop one of America's greatest exports, right? From censored to celebrated, that's a hell of a leap. Greetings, everybody. My name is Rodney Carmichael. I cover hip-hop at NPR and formerly hosted the podcast Louder Than a Riot. Now, I know we've had some big thinkers in the house this week, but I can guarantee you that nobody thinks about the politics of place, space, and race like hip-hoppers. And no genre in the history of recorded music has challenged, branded, or represented American cities bigger and better than hip-hop has. And joining me are some heavy hitters who embody that spirit. We have Tanya Clayhouse of the Hip Hop Caucus. We have Kimone Freeman of We Act Radio. We have Andrea Purnell of St. Louis Art Museum, and the real hip hop mayor himself, Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. Now, hopefully we understand by now that rap is the most consumed genre in the nation. America loves hip-hop and apple pie, so on and so forth. That's the popular narrative. But America does not always love or listen to the communities that give voice to hip-hop, you know? So what are we missing, first of all? I'm curious from everybody on the panel. As city leaders, as big thinkers, as problem solvers, what are we missing when we turn a deaf ear to the communities that are hip hop, Black and brown communities specifically?
I'll start out.
Okay.
So we're missing the story. Hip hop has traditionally, historically, been about telling our story in our communities. It's about what's happening. It's about how it is that we're surviving. And so when we're not listening, we're not paying attention to the artists and what they're talking about, we're missing what's happening right next door. Hip hop is a movement. It's not simply static. It's evolving. It always has been. And it evolves with what's happening in our everyday society. And so at the Hip Hop Caucus, that's what we always talk about, that if you're going to engage with us, then you need to understand who you're engaging with, how to engage with them, and how to respect what it is that people are trying to tell you. You may not like it. You may not appreciate it, understand, or think it's art. That's okay. It still is. And it's what it is, and it is a representation of what's happening in our communities. Now, if we want that to change, then we have to be about making that change and engaging with those that are in the movement. But they all are intertwined. And that's what we're missing if we don't listen. We're not hearing our story.
I think we're missing the power that hip hop has. I think the name of this panel could easily have been from condemnation to celebration. Because what you just saw there was him criminalizing an art form, right? And then he admitted that he's not an artist. So I think a lot of people, the gatekeepers, are not artists and are critiquing what art is. But now in almost every city, we see public art installations. We see Bloomberg, one of their largest global projects was how these public art installations actually save lives in traffic fatalities, and that paint has actually created a safer, more vibrant community. And hip hop had a lot to do with that. And I don't think we take enough credit for it. I don't think we acknowledge our power. I think the great writer Alice Walker says it best, the greatest power is convincing people they don't have any. Hip hop wasn't supposed to be here. It was created in South Bronx, and you don't know if you really looked at the scene and that environment, that was like Gaza-like conditions. And it came out of that, and now it's the biggest musical genre in the world.
I agree with what's been said, and will also add a level of authenticity is missing. I loved the opening clip, and I am from, an art museum, from arts and culture space, and I'm here to say that hip hop is indeed art. So much so that we created an entire exhibition, around the subject matter, looking at how art has influenced, hip hop has influenced specifically contemporary art in the last 21st century. So it's a movement, it is undeniable, a phenomenal art form that is continuing to evolve.
Well, I would imagine that people are at least a lot more elevated than they were when that video or documentary was done. Hip hop is 50 years old. That means there are people's grandchildren, mothers, families that have gone through this generationally. You can go to anywhere in the world, whether you're in Eastern Europe or China or deep in the continent of Africa or the Caribbean, and see people freestyling or breakdancing or imitating or, furthering what was created in the South Bronx out of a condition of poverty, of neglect, of inequity that people used really to put their voices out there and became as creative as possible to allow themselves to be heard, and then to monetize that at the same time. Because people know that art and culture is not just a social phenomenon, it's also an economic and political one. So there are whole groups or industries created because of art and culture, and specifically hip hop. So if we do not understand that and see that, then we're missing opportunities to develop our communities economically, to engage sectors of our city and parts of our community that are not engaged politically. We're missing opportunities to create that bridge to bring a lot of people into government, number one, into politics, and to create the economic engine that you need in your city, you're missing out completely if you don't tap into that.
Now, Mayor, the first time I heard your voice, and maybe true for a lot of people, was on the Lauryn Hill's classic album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. 25 years old this year. You were the educator in the interludes throughout that album. And in a lot of ways, I think you define those scenes in your classroom, help define not only the album, but Newark for me. You know, I'm from Atlanta. I was a long way away, but I saw a reality and a worldview through those interludes and you dealing with your students. In some ways, I'm curious, just as a lead into my next question, like, in what ways would you say that hip hop has kind of shaped or branded, which is kind of what you're talking about, the identity of Newark and you all's respective cities, be it culturally, politically, or even economic identity?
Well, number one, the importance of art and culture and the necessity of it to reinvigorate a city, to develop it economically, to reach out to people socially, as I was saying earlier, is an opportunity that we do not miss. And I think that comes from being immersed in hip hop culture and growing up and understanding the connectivity of all of those things and why it's necessary to have a relationship. We use hip hop to help us reduce violence and crime in 24 hours apiece. We use hip hop as a way to get people to come to City Hall and have open mics and talk about issues and political things that are going on in the city. We use hip hop to, create artists exhibits and murals across the city, right, to bring people out, wanting to engage them in politics, but create opportunity for people to come downtown or come in parts of the city that they haven't been in before. So we use it in many different ways. And then ultimately, for me, it kind of informs the way you govern because you know the inequities that exist in this country, in the world, in your city specifically, that there are voices that need to be reached out to, people that you need to build bridges for. And so you kind of govern in that capacity to try to make sure you create platforms for people. So if you don't want people scribbling on the walls, then you have to create opportunity for people to do it in a much better and more visual and inviting way. And my father would say when we were younger, people write on the walls because the walls are ignorant. And so it would seem to me that there's something that people have to say. And people who want people to know their name are people who feel invisible. So how do you make people feel visible? So writing their name is not the most thing they get out of this, that they want to do more than that, and we create an opportunity for more to actually take place.
I love that. It also reminds me of making your mark, on your city. I'll just use St. Louis as an example. Many don't realize how connected St. Louis, in fact, is to hip hop, very much so an epicenter, if you will. St. Louis was, in fact, the first radio station to ever play hip hop in the country, right? So being able to hold that mark, as something that is so meaningful is incredible. So hip hop gives cities a chance to be known for so many things, but their contributions.
Hip hop is a constituency now. Politicians use that constituency to get elected. It's a power block that you can activate if you know how, but I think sometimes we miss the communication and the engagement that you're talking about. Tanya, I'm curious, is hip-hop as a culture, as a community, being engaged enough? And if not, how should we be going about doing that?
It's a big question. I think that it's being engaged by some on a very cursory level in order just to seem as if they fit in, to make them feel, no pun intended, hip. However, hip hop is naturally disruptive. Hip hop was created in order to talk about what's happening in our communities, the change. Hip hop was about talking about Johnny who was killed on the streets by the police, talking about a grandmother who was dying because of cancer that is infecting their soil as a result of the toxins in their communities. Hip hop was created because of talking about the gun violence in their communities, talking about the lack of education. So when people bring up and use the music as a background, they need to make sure that they're actually explaining the meaning behind it and not just bouncing to the beats, because that's what hip hop is about, truly. And so, no, I don't feel that everyone is using hip hop in the way that it should be. In fact, I think they're using it in order to advance their own agenda, which may not necessarily be the agenda of those that they're talking about. This is why you hear of those many saying, don't use my music with your politics, because that's not what I'm talking about. That means they don't understand what's going on. And so that's what we keep saying at the caucus, is that you have to engage and really understand what the community is about, go to where they are, and if you know that, then you know when it is to use and how to bring in the music, and how to bring in the culture, how to bring in the fashion, how to bring in the art, the artistry, all of that and above. But to answer your question, yes and no, I think there's much more that can be done, and that's what we want to keep doing as we're working throughout the community, because this is about racial and socioeconomic justice.
Right. I want to co-sign on that. Chuck D famously said that hip-hop is Black America's CNN.
Right.
But I think we've kind of lost a step in our political advocacy. You know, what we have now is a version that's more acceptable to the state. That's why you see the vice president having a party, and during the Barack Obama years, it was a common reoccurrence. But was no real advocacy in that music. We don't have a public enemy anymore. You know, I think Dead Prez is about to come out with another album. I'm excited about that. Right. But we have to have something that reinforces our narrative, you know. And again, I don't think we're claiming our power. You know, if you can go watch, they cloned Tyrone, and you can see how they use the frequency, you know, and changed. I don't know if you guys saw that, but you need to check that out. You know, they changed the frequency, and the brothers was fighting, then they started hugging each other.
Right.
Now, it was a club scene that was monotonous music was playing to brainwash them. Cambridge University just released a study to show how hip-hop actually improves brain function. But if you understand the frequencies, you can manipulate that, and I think it has been manipulated. You know, right now, the world's most famous Palestinian is DJ Khaled.
That's right.
And he is mute on a lot of important issues. And just imagine what would happen if he wore a Palestinian Lives Matter t-shirt. He said ceasefire. You know, if for every casualty on both sides, he was like, there's another one, and another one, you know. He would change the whole narrative single-handedly. And he could do something with Drake, who's Jewish, you know. But that's not acceptable to the state, and they're more content with being, you know, enjoying the fruits of their labor from our audience of people who have a frequency that's been acceptable to the state.
That's really a great point, because the international capacity of hip hop is so underrated that there are hip hop artists probably in every culture you can imagine on the planet in multiple languages who communicate through the music and through the art form, who have an opportunity to discuss and talk high level on issues that are affecting their lives in their communities right now, in all parts of the world, and talk about that through the music. And I think the vice president was right. This is America's greatest export, but it's being used to sell clothes and sneakers and jewelry and diamonds and cars, to sell material as opposed to the ideas that created the music in the first place. And if we gave this forum an opportunity to talk about those ideas, I think some of the issues that we're dealing with politically and socially become easier for us to solve and engage and confront, as was pointed out. And I think we need to allow that to actually happen.
Andrea, I want to end on this exhibit, The Culture, that you co-curated at St. Louis Art Museum. I believe we may have some slides that
Yes.
start pulling up. And this exhibit examines hip-hop's ability to create alternate systems of power, which is what we're talking about. I'm really curious because we know the relationship between hip-hop and, you know, the contemporary visual art has not always, has been fraught sometimes, just like what we're talking about in every other area of life. Was this exhibit a hard sell for the museum?
I don't know about a hard sale, but I will say the idea of, you know, a white cube space, you know, introducing hip hop was very unique for perhaps our core audience. So if you slide through, you can see a few more of the images, you know, thinking about ceramics, you know, with Biggie Smalls and, you know, Tupac Shakur with beading literally on his bandana. You can continue to slide through, and Tashabalala's self is representing Little Kim, you know, in such a way. And these are life-size works. They're pretty massive. Zepolito, we see Brand, of course, with FUBU. We're being introduced to the do-rag. So again, for traditional museum goers, this may not necessarily be, you know, what they're thinking they're going to come in and experience, but they are finding themselves in the art, you know, which is what it's all about. We think of graffiti, which is one of the pillars of hip hop, literally a language. As we continue, you know, you're seeing, you know, this being expressed in this work. Not only the graffiti and the tagging, but the Japanese histories being presented here, connections to community, as this artist allows his friends in the Boyle Heights neighborhood to literally tag the work. So you're having community have their say, you know, in the art making, and especially this work. Adrian Octavius Walker, who is from St. Louis, has remixed, if you will, reimagined A Great Day in Harlem, A Great Day in Hip Hop, originally done by Art Kane in the late 50s that looked at jazz artists, and then Gordon Parks assembled in 1998 177 of hip hop's finest. And then in 2022, Adrian assembled St. Louis's finest. So this idea of, you know, community being brought into the museum, into the space, a part of the celebration, has been core to the experience, really core to us as a curatorial team, to make sure that their voice was included, had a say, was important, and was indeed heard.
Okay. Now, in the spirit of hip hop being disruptive, I know our time has ended, but I want to get one more question in, if possible. You know, one thing that's really interesting to me, and that I I write about in my work and a lot, is this huge disconnect between the economic disparity and disadvantage that hip hop hoods suffer, and the wealth, the technical innovation, the global branding that these same communities create. So, in thinking about hip hop going forward and the future, and bringing a little Afrofuturism into the conversation, how can we truly bridge that gap? What is needed? Is it a paradigm shift, or, you know, why are our communities considered disadvantaged when they're creating all this wealth for everybody, it seems, except for the community? How do we figure that out?
I think because we are often the creators, but we are very often not the owners. And you start out being disadvantaged when you don't recognize your value and you are not able to have equity in your work. When you look at a lot of the Hip Hop 50 celebrations, a lot of those celebrations weren't produced by hip hop artists or hip hop organizations or people that's directly connected with culture. It was corporations who see the vitality from that, and they choose who is going to be on there. And they choose. I remember Special Ed was saying that he turned it down because they wasn't paying enough. You know, because you were old school, you're not current, so they thought we can get you at a discount. Yeah. You know, we got to recognize that value. So it's about having control of your art form, and we often lose control of our art forms. And I think that until that changes, we'll still see more of the same.
Yeah.
All right.
Thinking of a master plan. Ain't nothing but sweat inside my hand. Dig into my pocket, all my money is spent. I dig deeper, still coming up with lint. So I start the mission thinking how I get some more dead presidents, right? That's Rakim.
God.
Talking about his, quest to get resources and money, and prayerfully the rap that he's doing is leading them in that direction. And our struggles here in America and all over the world as people who have been dispossessed of their things, in a position of power but powerlessness, trying to fight for our ability to be seen, to be heard, to take care of our families, our communities. At the same time, I think hip hop represents that legacy of those things in a very upfront, in-your-face way that some people can't deal with. But the reality is, it really explains our condition and our desire to be treated as other human beings and to be able to take care of ourselves like other human beings.
I would co-sign on that and just add that that's why we've got to ensure that we're about helping each other in the community. We have to support one another. If we don't, who is? And as you were just saying, that most create, but we're not owning. We don't own the production. We don't own the distribution. We don't own the redistribution. That is where all of the economic vitality is coming from. And so it's about economic justice in our society. And we know as a community that we have been pushed, that we have been oppressed, particularly in the Black community, and that coming together is not necessarily as in, something that we have been accustomed to in a way in this society. It does not contribute to us being able to support one another. So we have to take our power back and recognize that this is our power, that the hip hop culture is our power, and recognize what that means, and then support one another in that. And so that's why we have to be sure to take back that narrative, not let others own the narrative of who we are, not let others tell us what hip hop should be about and how it can be distributed. Let us be the ones who are telling our narrative so that we can retain our power and be the ones that are about actually making the change and uplifting our own communities for Black liberation.
All right. And with that part. I think we're good. Thank y'all. Thank you, panel. Right. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Happy hip hop, everybody.